Hey, what's going on? It's Matt Polis, and it's time for another episode of MeatSauce for Tuesday, March the 2nd, 2021. This is episode number 20. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me as we have reached this next very small milestone of this podcast. I will say, though, I did not start this podcast just to do 20 episodes, so I think you might be stuck with me for a little while. I hope that's okay. And as always, I don't say it every week, but if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the podcast and sharing it on social media. The show has been seeing some consistent viewership and growth over the last couple months, and I would love to see it continue to trend in that direction. So if you've enjoyed the podcast thus far and think others may enjoy it too, please let them know about it. This is kind of my shameless plug, as it kind of seems to be the kind of thing you have to do in today's world to kind of, not promote yourself, but kind of promote yourself, like get yourself out there, because there's just so much content to absorb around the globe. It's hard to take up people's time with your show. So just trying to slowly grow this thing, get more comfortable behind the mic, doing all the things that we're doing here each and every week. So, not that I'm trying to be the next Joe Rogan or anything, but I do want to kind of be that outlet of conversation for someone, excuse me, conversation for someone who might need it, or that, outlet of validation for someone who may be experiencing some of the same things I've been going through, especially during this pandemic. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of the support thus far, and cheers to the next 20. I hope the last week or so has treated you well. It's been a little crazy for me personally. Just had a lot of things to take care of. I'm managing it all and trying to control what I can control, and really not let anything get the better of me. All I will say is that healthcare is really confusing when you have to go get it yourself. And that's what I've had to do over the last couple weeks. And it is confusing, man. Like, there's just so many ins and outs, and it's probably easy for some people, but there's different thresholds of tax brackets and stuff. So where you are really kind of affects how that stuff is handled, and it's a really tricky system in that sense, but it seems like everything is somewhat figured out. So all I can do is wait and see. And it may sound like I'm saying these things very calmly and rationally, but that's because I've already kind of expressed my frustrations and fears over the last week in the confines of my home. So there's that. But it's one of those things, like when I have to get stuff done like that, like life things, I obsess over them and I get them done, but then I continue to obsess over them and question, did I do it right? I have to keep going back and looking at the account. It's like, oh, I did it. I paid that. I did this. But I just obsess over double, triple, quadruple checking that I did it. And it's like waiting to see everything update to show me active and show me enrolled and show me having done the right things. I obsess over it, and it's really stressful. I wish I wasn't like that, but I can't seem to help it sometimes. I do want to give a quick documentary recommendation if you're into that sort of thing. Jess and I recently watched the new Billie Eilish documentary on Apple TV Plus. It was so good. And I don't want to say so good, because I feel like when I say it was so good, it means unreal, unbelievable. It was really good. It was fun to watch. It's about 2 hours long, but it really did fly by. It was really cool to see where she comes from and how she got to where she is. I won't spoil too much of it, but, her and her brother recorded and produced her most recent album entirely in their parents' house in her brother's bedroom. And it's just crazy to think about how massive that album blew up, and to know it had such humble beginnings of being created in a bedroom, and it kind of gives, all of us tiny, small creators out there, some hope, I'm creating this literally at our dining room table, which happens to be connected to our living room. So it's you just never really know. So Her brother is also mega talented with producing and singing and playing guitar and whatever other instruments, piano. And I guess apparently, again, I won't spoil too much, but Billie hates writing songs. And so her brother does a lot of that. But if you have Apple TV Plus, it is worth the watch for sure. I think you can get a 7-day free trial if you wanted to get it just to watch for that and then just cancel the free trial so you don't have to pay anything. I will say if you buy a new MacBook, they give you a year subscription for free. So that was kind of cool. But it just seems like Billie Eilish comes from like very humble beginnings, in a very supportive family. And I just love seeing people who make it big, when they come from, again, recording a Grammy-winning album in your brother's bedroom. It just speaks volumes to the talent. And maybe they had some connections that, us regular people don't always have. But it's still cool. I mean, even all the way through the documentary, it's still so much of it takes place at her parents' house, which is just like a small little house in LA. It's just really cool. So I would go watch it if you can. It's fun, and her music's obviously so catchy. It's so different than what you usually hear from somebody so young. So that's all I have about that. Let's get into this week's edition of What's on the Shelf. We are traveling once again to the state of Kentucky, shocking, and stopping at the Four Roses Distillery in Lawrenceburg. This week we are taking a look at the Four Roses Small Batch Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. In 1884, a man by the name of Paul Jones Jr. moved his company to Louisville, Kentucky, and later trademarked the name Four Roses and claimed that production and sales began back in the 1860s. In 1922, Paul Jones' company purchased the Frankfurt Distilling Company, and in 1943, the Seagram Corporation purchased the Frankfurt Distilling Company primarily to acquire the Four Roses Kentucky Straight Bourbon brand. Four Roses at the time was the top-selling bourbon in the United States in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Seagram, for whatever reason, decided to discontinue the sale of Four Roses in the United States, and thus the product was moved to being sold in the European and Asian markets, where it became a top-selling bourbon. Today, it still is a top seller in both Europe and Japan, which is pretty crazy. The Four Roses brand was officially brought back to being sold in the States back in 2002 when the Kirin, I'm not sure how to say that, brewery company purchased the brand trademark and was named Four Roses Distillery LLC shortly after. The lineup of Four Roses includes Four Roses Kentucky Straight Bourbon, Four Roses Small Batch, and then they also have a single barrel and a small batch select in a limited edition. So the small batch, which is what we're looking at today, is aged 6 to 7 years and comes in at 90 proof or 45% alcohol by volume. The mash bill is said to be a blend of two different mash bills, including 75% corn, 20% rye, and 5% malted barley in the first mash bill, and then the other one containing 60% corn, 35% rye, and 5% malted barley. So that second mash bill is a little more of a high rye mash bill to kind of add some spice to it. The bourbon definitely in the bottle takes on a very, very prominent honey color, and it's really not much darker than that. It looks very much like honey, just without the thickness of honey. It retails for about $30. I think I've seen it in Michigan for about $32. Some nosing notes include your typical bourbon notes: oak, some citrus fruit, some caramel, some spice. The nose is pretty approachable as the notes are not overpowering at just the 90 proof. The palate is very similar as to not overpower you, but gives you an approachable and typical bourbon to sip on. It's not really complex, but it is a great entry-level daily sipper. I personally, for me, there are other great entry-level bourbons for even a little bit cheaper of a price, but this one is good to try and to see if you like it, as there are high-proof Four Roses to jump up to if you like the Four Roses profile, and what they put out. So there's definitely, tiers of different ones you can try from the Four Roses lineup. And this bottle we have here, the small batch, is actually Jess's bottle, and she's really liked it. I mean, she's almost drank the whole thing. She likes it with old fashions and Manhattans a lot. She doesn't necessarily like the higher proof bourbons, not yet anyways, or drinking bourbon always neat. So for her, this is really perfect for old fashions, Manhattans, drinking it over ice, and it doesn't break the bank as far as that goes. So she really enjoys it. I think it is a good entry level bourbon to try different types of mash bills, different companies, see how they do it, differently. And so far, on this show, I've reviewed, the Old Forester 86 and Wild Turkey 101. So this is comparable to that. Obviously, a lower proof than the Wild Turkey 101. But again, you're going to get a different type of flavor profile. So definitely worth checking out just to add to the collection and kind of as you're still trying to figure out what you like. I'm certainly still in that camp too. Every night that I'm drinking something different, I'm trying to decide, why I like that thing that I'm drinking. And you can only do that by trying a lot of different ones. So definitely would check out the Four Roses small batch from Four Roses Distillery. All right, that is this week's episode of What's on the Shelf. Now let's move on into some sports from the last week or so. News broke actually yesterday that defensive end J.J. Watt has officially signed with the Arizona Cardinals on a 2-year, $31 million deal, with $23 million of that guaranteed. It's not really a team I expected him to sign with. But, he's now reunited with DeAndre Hopkins, the wide receiver for the Cardinals, who also used to play for the Texans. But, man, the NFC West is pretty loaded, and you have to think the 49ers will be back, especially after all the injuries they had during the 2020 season. But now you've got J.J. Watt, you've got Aaron Donald, you've got Nick Bosa, and the Seahawks don't really have that big, defensive lineman, but it's interesting. I mean, I'm kind of glad to see the price that he was, the $31 million with $23 million guaranteed. I'm kind of glad that the Browns stayed away from that. Not too bad in that sense. And now, like I said last week, there's still plenty of guys that the Browns can go get. I would love to see them make a move at Von Miller from the Broncos, or there's several other guys, a couple guys from the Buccaneers. So that would be pretty cool to think, about Myles Garrett and Von Miller together, And I think we should start seeing a lot of free agent signings and trades happening over the next few weeks in the NFL. The new NFL season starts on March the 17th at 4 p.m., and that is where free agent signings and trades can become official. So it's already been a decently active offseason so far for the NFL, and I think it's going to get a lot busier and exciting. Growing up, I always felt like the MLB offseason was this way, and now the NFL offseason has become so much more exciting. You got more guys switching teams. You have more, almost has like an NBA feel to it in a different sense. NBA, those guys, like 2 or 3 guys travel together, the different teams, and they just load up certain teams. NFL is still very even playing field because of the salary cap and everything, but you see guys trying to team up and go to different teams. It's starting to happen a little bit more, and it just makes it more fun for fans to watch. So it's just another thing that they're better at than the Major League Baseball is, unfortunately. But looking forward to seeing what happens with any sort of trades across the league, and definitely keep you posted on things that are happening as we go along here. A couple Cincinnati Reds updates. Spring training has begun. They've currently played 2 games so far. They lost the first game on Sunday 5-1 to the Cleveland Indians, and I know Votto had a couple hits and an RBI, and I think Kyle Farmer may have had a base hit too, I believe. Farmer also has a new number this year, number 17. He also missed the bus to the game and had to ride in the car with manager David Bell to the stadium, so Not exactly the type of coverage you want as you are trying to, win the starting shortstop position. And people already are questioning whether you should be there or not in that position. Also, if you haven't seen or heard, Eugenio Suarez, he lost about 10 to 15 pounds this offseason. He said he felt slow last season and decided to cut a lot of things out of his diet. So he looks incredibly skinny now, and a little bit more like the shortstop version of Eugenio Suarez that the Reds traded for with the Tigers, several years ago. So hopefully, I do worry, hopefully he can maintain the power he's had the last couple of years. I don't know if weight loss and all of that affects that at all. His upper body still looks strong and his legs still look strong. So hopefully it's just like a weight loss thing and not necessarily losing muscle or any of that. And if it allows him to be quicker on his feet on defense too, I mean, we could sure use that at third base. But honestly, what if he could, slide over and play shortstop from time to time? Because then you can move all kinds of guys around. You can, move Moustakas over to third base, or you could do really anything. The Reds also played yesterday. They played the Oakland A's, and I believe the last time I had checked in, they were losing 8-1, and I think it was like very early in the game. So I didn't pay attention to it too much after that. But they do play tonight against the LA Angels, and that game is actually available to watch on MLB.tv. So I definitely want to tune into that and get my first look at the Reds, on TV live. So spring training is just kind of a hard thing to follow, because it isn't really about winning ball games to the extent of what the regular season is. Obviously, it's mostly about getting back into the swing of things. No pun intended. And getting used to playing every day again and player development. And I was looking into some of the new rule changes for spring training this year, and there's some interesting, it's weird how they've decided all this. So I'll give you just a couple here. So any game from the start of spring training until March 13th can be played as at least a 5-inning game. And so you just have to play at least 5 innings if you want. And this is decided between the two managers of the teams that are playing against each other. And they discuss it prior to the game. And they decide we just want to go 5 today, or we want to go 7 or 8, or you want to play the full 9, or you want to even play the full 9 where the home team is winning and they still bat in the bottom of the ninth just to get extra at bats. So that's all decided from the managers. And then from March 14th to the end of spring training, you have to at least play a 7-inning game. So it goes from at least 5 innings to at least 7 innings now, if wanted by both managers. So like I said, both managers decide this prior to the game, and it's really being done to prevent injury and not to overuse pitchers. Rosters, from what I've heard, rosters are smaller at spring training this year because of COVID. They're trying to keep the club sizes smaller so that there's not so many people with potential spread. So due to COVID, they just have smaller rosters. So I know on Sunday, the Reds game was only 8 innings long. I don't know why not playing the 9th. It seems kind of strange, and then also an inning can be ended prior to 3 outs if the pitcher who is pitching has thrown at least 20 pitches in that inning. So the defensive manager can just say the inning is over, regardless of who's on base, what's happening. If that pitcher has thrown too many pitches, they simply can just end the inning right there. So it's, like I said, it's definitely not about winning ball games at this point. It's really just trying to not have too many injuries going into the start of the season and not to overuse a pitcher, again, because every team has a smaller amount of players. Usually you have all these guys fighting for roster spots that you can just kind of throw in to pitch in the game at any point in time, but with them having smaller rosters, it's just not possible. Also, if a pitcher is taken out of the game, he can actually re-enter at a later point in the game, which you can't do in the regular season. Baseball in general, you can't do that, but I don't know the thought process behind that. I don't really know why they are allowing a pitcher to re-enter later. Maybe it's, you have a guy who's pitching who didn't throw a whole lot of pitches and you take him out, and then the next guy comes in and ends up throwing way more than you anticipated, so you just want to save him, and you bring the other guy back in since he didn't throw very much. So I'm not sure, but obviously none of these rules will extend into the regular season. It's really, again, just a way for teams to help prevent injury and not to overuse pitchers, as they're dealing with smaller rosters. But it's crazy. Opening day is very, very close. The Reds open on April the 1st, which is really, really exciting. A quick side note, the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, has said that the Reds can have a 30% capacity of fans to start the 2021 season, which is really exciting. It feels like we're getting there, and I think the Red Stadium holds 40 to 42,000, I think, so that might be about 12 to 13,000 fans in the stands. So hopefully it will be expanded as the season goes on and more people get vaccinated, etc. But man, it just feels like we're getting so close to somewhat of a sense of normalcy. We're still probably several months away, but you can just kind of start to see the light at the end of this very, very long tunnel, But other than that, not too much really happening in the sports world. NCAA March Madness should be here very soon, which will be really fun to watch. I believe it starts March 18th, so keep an eye out for that. I think there's going to be quite a few different teams in the tournament this year, at least maybe a lot of the same teams we're used to seeing, but just at very different seeds than where we normally see them. So I think it's going to be a very interesting tournament. So I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for joining me. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and sharing the show on social media. I, again, am slowly seeing some growth in the reach with this show and would love to keep it going. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will check in with you next week. Bye, everybody.